and it's a very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel. Another big week in sport, and Judge, we might come to you to start with. St Kilda, and we were doing some calculations during the week, and it turns out that over their in excess of 100 plus year history, they have only managed to win 38% of the matches they've ever played. Question to you: why do we continue to support perennially unsuccessful teams?
Yeah, look, it saddens me to have this topic, Professor. Not only have they had that woeful percentage, but in next year's their 150th season. They've won one premiership in that time, and I think that would put them up there with the worst sporting clubs in the world. I can't think of another team or club that's played 150 years and only once have they managed to reach the pinnacle of what they're trying to do, whereas they've got 17 wooden spoons, which is last position, and the 38%, which is, as you would, thank you for the research, Professor, way below the average of most other clubs in the league. They are perennially unsuccessful. Why we continue to follow them, I've been trying to work this out. This will sound silly, but it's the only other relationship where you love something absolutely unconditionally is a child. Even your friends, you don't love them unconditionally. You know, friends come and go, but once you've got a football team or a basketball team or whatever, you stick fast. But that's a real problem for the team, because in the case of St Kilda, we come to expect a lack of success, and I think it's now become more than cultural. It's now entrenched in St Kilda that middle of the league is okay. A final is terrific. Fourth position is absolutely fantastic, but we're actually okay to settle with a lack of success. I'm not, and I'm going to tell you, something has to happen down St Kilda, because it's gone beyond us. It's a statistical fact now that we accept failure, and I'm sick of it.
I've got to jump in there and say this. I've got a life saying, and I don't know if it's Confucius, but the shadow proves the sunshine. And I think I know what it means, in that I was in court the day that the Rabbitohs were readmitted to the comp. I was in the grandstands when we were losing 44-10 to a team called the Gold Coast Seagulls, who don't even exist. I was there when we were cheering Seagulls, 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 and all that made it all the sweeter when not only did we make a grand final about 5 years ago, that we actually won the thing. So that's the only that's my Libran optimist cap on, is that the worse you are, the sweeter it will make it. It's not like you expect to win every year. And I can honestly say this with the Rabbitohs: I'd love another premiership. I'd love to book another trip to Sydney and see another grand final win. And it's not even a case of law of diminishing returns that the second one wouldn't be as sweet. It's just that hope. And you see a bit of it with these Demons fans as well. I mean, Professor, do you truly think that you're going to make the grand final and win it, despite the fact you're top of the table?
This year?
Yeah.
No, we might not make it this year, but I've seen enough to say that we may well be successful for quite a number of years to come.
But can you not say that what you've been through will make it all the sweeter if you do get there to the promised land?
Oh, if we get there, it'll be the closest to ecstasy I think I've ever been.
Is that the substance? So anyway, the feeling. But yeah. So I guess that's what helped me in the toughest times. I didn't know that the tide would turn as a Rabbitohs fan. I mean, look at Dan, some of the NFL teams over there, and the Cubs, for example. What got those fans through all those years? I presume part of it is a hope that the tide will turn and it'll be all the sweeter when it does.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You know, I know Gelding wants to talk here real quick too, but I mean, I think that there's two factors for that. I think one, you kind of grow up. I think Judge mentioned it. You grow up liking a certain team. So if your parents like for me, that my parents like the Cubs, you know, their parents before them like the Cubs, it grows in the family. So you kind of stick with that team because you're watching it. I mean, the one great thing about the Cubs, when I was growing up, they were on TV every afternoon after I came home from school. So I could watch them every day because they played afternoon games in that respect. I think another benefit, another thing that people like about these teams is they're underdogs. I mean, everybody wants to root for the underdog. Everybody thinks, hey, this is a team that doesn't usually win. And when they do win, it's hey, they won a game, that type of stuff. As we joked about the Knicks and some other teams. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys, for one, they haven't had success here in the States since the Troy Aikman years. I mean, it's just teams that you like, and get the most coverage, but they may not be the best teams out there.
Gelding?
On that, I'd just like to say, and probably ask John a question. I think Dan's hit it on the head. You grow up with sides, through families and things like that. But like, John, did you follow St Kilda when they were a strong side, say mid-60s, 70s,
Exactly
things
right.
like that?
Yeah, exactly
and
right.
then follow them? Because I like Oakland Raiders in the NFL.
Yeah.
In the 70s and the 80s, they were strong. They've done nothing for 30 years. So when you first started following St Kilda, were they a strong side?
They were, and I use the word attractive, which sounds weird, but that's the only way I can use to describe them. They had a really attractive team. The players in those days, you look at Dietrich, Baldock,
Stewart,
Roberts, back and then later on Trevor Barker. But in '65, they were a really likely team. They lost the grand final that year. Next year, they won over Collingwood, which was just wonderful. And then I was sure that I'd made the right choice, because nobody in my family followed St Kilda. Richmond was our dad's team, and North Melbourne was the zone team. But they were a great looking side. But once you've got to that age, and that age I was about 8 or 9, I reckon that's when you get kids, about 8 or 9. But once you get them, you've got them for life. It's just, and I'm sure it's the same with you, Dan, you can't change football teams. I know some people who have. After the Footscray fight back in '89, Professor, a good friend of mine who was a lifelong North supporter, followed Footscray because he loved the fight that they showed with the take on the AFL, the VFL at the time. But you generally don't change a team. And as I say, I've struggled working out why it is. It's so visceral. It's almost like a relationship you have with a child. You just love them.
Well, it's funny you say that, because former panellist Mark Fiorenti, when Melbourne Heart came in, because when I moved from Sydney, we adopted, he was following Melbourne Victory already. I jumped on because I'd moved from Sydney, didn't really have a soccer team or allegiance to Sydney FC. But when he announced he was going to start following the Heart, I took it personally. It just was like, oh, wow. And then another friend following that new team, whatever they're called, Melbourne United, because the home games are near where he lives at Altona. It's not an insult, but it really is almost grating that, how could you abandon ship? But that, in that case, there's addition of new teams, but I guess that's maybe more justifiable, because I'm a very loyal type. I love that I followed the Rabbitohs in the Shire, which that wasn't an easy thing to do, because the Cronulla area is not overly welcoming to an outsider. Just ask the Lebanese. I shouldn't say that. But as a Rabbitohs fan, every year I'd go to that hill at Shark Park, and one year they set fire to my backpack that Mum had just bought me at age 27. It was very embarrassing, but they put lit cigarette butts on my hand and all sorts of things. But I love that tribalism of it all, that I'd wear that Rabbitohs jersey on that Sharks hill, and I survived.
And there's something to be said, what you said, Paul, about the underdog factor. The Cubbies were which is also my team, Dan, but they're so unsuccessful. Back to the Future 2 had a scene where he predicted the Cubbies would win the World Series, and the guy said, God, who would have thought the Cubbies would win the World Series? It was such a meme that it was it passed for a TV film that everybody understood how useless the Cubbies were. So there is a lot to be said about following an underdog team. But to go back to your Rabbitohs, Paul, would you agree that the Rabbitohs changed when their ownership structure changed? And they got a few, Russell Crowe and those guys came in. They actually changed the whole, feel of the place.
It was more than that. The players that we previously would have paid $500 for, we were getting for their market value, which is $350, for example. Like guys, you win a premiership not with your superstars, because every club can afford a few of those. But you'll only be a good team when the players want to be there. But the players will only want to be there when it's a good team. So something has to change. Like your club, for example, Eric Banner, we've talked about. If he took over, there might be a good feeling in the place, and you're getting those players that are weighing up whether to go somewhere or not. And it was those players that managers were saying, there's something happening at the Rabbitohs, you want to be a part of this. And it wasn't just being flown to LA and the Armani suits and the PowerPoint presentations apparently Russell Crowe was putting on. It was momentum that came from the ownership. And without Russell Crowe taking over, we wouldn't have won those premierships and we wouldn't be the powerhouse we are now, which came on the back of going from a basket case that no one wants to join. We're now at a club that's in the top 4 in the game. And that will attract those players that are weighing up. We might even get players for unders now. Now, with the salary cap, it's never been more important to get those marginal players wondering whether they should join a club or not. So there's an amazing vibe at the Rabbitohs. There was always the belief in the club, much like St Kilda now. The fans are diehard, fanatical, but there needs to be something to change for you to get those fringe players, you know, like a Josh Kelly or someone like that who wants to come to your club as opposed to the clubs that are going to win flags shortly.
And Professor, we've talked about private ownership and what a horrible word it is for AFL. And it's interesting this week that Jeffrey Edelston passed away, but he and his ilk are the exception to private ownership. Private ownership is not a dirty word as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not against an Eric Banner or similar putting together a well-capitalised bid to take over St Kilda. For God knows, the supporters don't have any democracy in the club anyway, so they might as well have an owner that actually cares, rather than this lackadaisic attitude we see from St Kilda at the moment.
Judge, what prompted me to go to the record books to have a look for those percentages was the article that you and I discussed via text during the week about something we both hate, and that is players using corporate speak to explain why they're behaving or why they're playing poorly or not winning games. Could we have your thoughts on that for a couple of seconds?
Yeah, rock bottom, Professor. When the club starts to send out this corporate speak, not just to the players, but they put it on social media so everybody, and this is deliberate, so everybody can hear that we're really keen now, we're going to get over the errors of the past and we're going to have excellence and all that crap. That is just corporate speak. And what's annoying is that it's clearly designed to placate people like myself, the supporters out there. Look, we're doing something. It's that sort of distraction theory. Don't be distracted by what's happening on the field. Look at what we're doing about it. Isn't this wonderful? And I absolutely hate corporate speak. I hate it generally, but being used in the way it is now to placate people like me and the rest of the supporters, I think it's a really negative turn that the skill is taking.
Just to all the panellists, one of the terms that the judge and I took issue with was one of the senior St Kilda players saying, we need to learn what extreme effort is. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if you're playing at the top level of professionalism in a sport, you should already know what extreme effort is and shouldn't need to be told it by anybody else. Thoughts to the rest of the panel?
Well,
I used to get annoyed. Tiger Woods never used to give much away. He was almost press coach that he would never give anything away at all. He'd have that sort of corporate type speak, and you wouldn't learn much from his interviews as well. But yeah, if you don't know what extreme effort is, I'd probably watch a game of State of Origin if you want to see what extreme effort is. They certainly know what it is.
Gelding?
Well, Professor, I would say John would be very worried. St Kilda are paying a lot of players some big money, and if they're not performing at their absolute maximum, that would be very disappointing. If you're going to take 800,000 as a pay packet, or 600,000 or $500,000 as a pay packet, as a spectator or a member of your club, you would want them to be performing at their maximum effort, wouldn't you?
And of course, Dan's sitting there saying 800,000, the lowest paid player in the second league are probably on 800,000, but it's all relative. But that's another thing too. I think the salary cap, I've now come to the view that the salary cap may not be the be-all and end-all that it pretends to be. I'm not sure how the salary cap's going in your sports, Dan, whether it's universal but the money that the American players seem to be getting is, beyond our wildest dreams here.
Yeah. Oh, it's significant. I mean, you look at quarterbacks who are being paid $40 million a year. to play, and the salary caps in the NFL are $200 million or more, per team. I mean, you talk about 1/5 of the salary cap going to your quarterback in that respect. Baseball, I mean, the average salaries are in the millions. And now, I mean, you have 30 million, 35, $40 million players in baseball. Both have salary caps in that respect. The NBA, same thing. I mean, LeBron and those players, $30 million plus contracts, but they all have salary caps they're working around. They just got to find those other players to fit the mold. But I mean, as you're talking about St. Kilda and others, and the effort, extreme effort, I mean, it is disappointing to hear that. You think every player would be given that, but maybe those players are given their best effort and they're not as strong of players. And maybe the coaching staff, maybe it's the coaching staff that can't motivate the players to get to that effort as well. So it seems like a philosophical issue if they're being quoted about giving extreme effort.
Tom, just on that, which I kind of heard during the week, someone say, you look at our pay packets and that some of these players are being paid the equivalents of CEOs, major politicians in the country, like more than premiers and more than prime ministers, and things like that. And I suppose the question was raised with St. Kilda, when they chose to come home. Like, if they're getting this pay for an 8-month period, is there certain things that they have to give up to be the elitism of sport? Whereas, okay, if you want to be with your family and you don't want to go into hubs and all that, fine. And if you want to play footy, play local football, but don't expect to be paid 800,000 and then, or 600,000 and then be able to pick and choose. Is there room? Do you have to give something up when you say, I'm an elite sportsman, I'm in that sport, this is when this sport is played? Does that become the number one priority above everything else? Or do you take the other option of saying, well, I'll leave whenever I want to leave, or I've got some issues and I want time off? Well, maybe don't be that elite sportsman. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think you're channeling Carolyn Wilson here in relation to those two St. Kilda.
Oh, no. And believe me, I don't agree. If people have mental health problems and things like that, but elite sportsmen have a choice, don't they?
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Professor, what's your view?
Yeah, I'm just going to finish on this one, John. When you heard that the St. Kilda players, from one of their senior players, that they all needed to learn what extreme effort was, how did that make you feel as a Saints fan?
Yeah, there's a game called BS Bingo. And it used to be when you hear a corporate speak and you'd say, you call out the BS words that come out. Listening to that whole discussion, Professor, it was like BS Bingo. And that's perhaps just me. Perhaps it means something to the players. I don't think it does, but perhaps it does. But if that's what they have to be told to get extreme effort or to play well, heaven help me. It's not the game that I know. The game that I know is that, like Gelding says, if you're a professional, there's only one way you know, and that is flat out, full effort all the time. And I'm bugging if I could think that St. Kilda at the moment is playing full effort. There's something seriously wrong down there. I hope it's not culture, because once it's culture, that's good night nurse. But it's fair to say I hated what I heard, Professor.
I might have played that game once, Judge, with words like synergies, touch points, one of my favourites. I recently was asked to find a client's hotspot, which I thought was a bit too much of an ask. But and I love that phrase, going forwards. It's very hard to go backwards. But yeah, it comes up a lot in meetings.
All right, gentlemen, well, we're using another BS Bingo word. We might circle back to that discussion later on.
Professor, can I just add?
Yes.
Sportsfan Radio's Craig Robinson, in race 2 at Bendigo, ran third on double chance, paying $2.90.
Oh, very good for the punters, Gelding.
Well, he was last coming around the turn, Professor, and maybe one to follow next start, I think, double chance.
Okay, Gelding. Dan, the NBA playoffs right at the pointy end, and a big Game 7 being played currently between Milwaukee and Brooklyn, and Milwaukee, I see, 1 point in front into the fourth quarter.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, 4 points behind.
That's one thing. The fourth quarter is underway, and it's a one bucket game between Milwaukee and Brooklyn, and it's seven in the game 7. So whoever wins that one goes to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I know that you talk about extreme effort. I guarantee you, every player on that team right now is doing everything they can in this final 12 minutes to see what they can get done there. And you got the other series in the East with Atlanta and Philadelphia going to a game 7 as well. So obviously both Eastern Conference teams or series taking it to the full 7 to get into the Eastern Conference Finals. But yeah, this Milwaukee and Brooklyn series right now is pretty doggone competitive, this game tonight.
Okay, now one of our sometimes presenters, Glennie Hampson, a big Phoenix Suns supporter, ecstatic that they beat the Nuggets 4-0 in their semi-final.
Yeah, as good as the Nuggets were all season long, and the Phoenix Suns swept them. And you guys talk about a team that's had its issues over the years. Phoenix has really struggled in bringing Chris Paul onto the team and getting that leadership with some of the really good young players they've got. They took it to the Nuggets and swept them, and right now may be the favorite getting into the NBA Finals, given the Clippers, LA Clippers have made it to the finals without their star players, playing Kawhi Leonard not being able to play due to a knee injury. But right now, the Phoenix Suns are on a roll, 4-0 sweep there. They'll play the Clippers to see who gets to that championship series.
Dan, a lot said about LeBron James. If we look at Kawhi Leonard, he's a basketballer that's had success wherever he's been. Started off with the San Antonio Spurs, won championships, went to the Toronto Raptors, who are another team who've never really had success, won a championship. Now with the Clippers, they've been successful ever since he got there.
Yeah, I think I've said that on the show many times when we talked about the NBA playoffs. I'm never going to vote against Kawhi Leonard, in that respect. I've learned my lesson over the years. And obviously, I watched him very closely when I was at the Mountain West Conference in college basketball. He played at San Diego State University, and then was a great defensive player, worked on his game to improve offensively, and then became one of the best players. He'll be a Hall of Famer in the NBA. But you look at the Clippers and what they've done. I think 6 of the last 7 years, if I know the stat correctly, they've outplayed the LA Lakers in the regular season, had a better winning record than the LA Lakers in the regular season. The Clippers have. Kawhi coming to this team, they have a shot to get to the NBA Finals. I don't know when Kawhi is going to be back, if he's going to be back due to a sprained knee. They've had Paul George, Terrence Mann, Reggie Jackson, even Patrick Beverley step up and do what they needed to do to win their previous series over Utah. But Kawhi is a great leader, a quiet leader. He's not one that's going to go out there and boast like a LeBron James will do. Be a very strong spokesperson, but Kawhi just goes out, plays, and gets it done. Well,
Kawhi's chops with in finals was shown very early. Mountain West tournament, New Mexico were favoured, and San Diego State beat them.
Absolutely, yeah, and he was such a fun player to watch, and just an amazing talent. You talk about some great attributes to NBA players or great players in the NBA. You looked at hand size, and Kawhi's hands were probably 3 times the size of my hands. I mean, he just giant hands, great defensively, very quick defensively, and would rather show on the court, would rather let his actions on the court speak than speak off the court. And he did it day in, day out in the Mountain West.
Okay, Dan. So the West is set, Phoenix and the Clippers. Who'll win and in how many games?
You put me on. I'm really good at these. You guys know that. So, obviously the way the Suns are playing, and Chris Paul's, injured as well, but he seems to continue to play. I'm hearing Kawhi's not going to travel to Phoenix for their first game, at least in that respect. So it's going to be an interesting series. I think Paul George and that team have stepped up and done what they needed to do. Phoenix has been off a week, so I think Phoenix will be a little rusty in this first game. LA may be able to sneak the first game against the Suns, but I think it's going to be competitive. I think it goes at least 6 on that side, and then we'll see what happens on the Eastern side. These games are going to be pretty close to see who gets into that championship. Atlanta's played very well. They got a 7th game against Philadelphia, and then obviously we've got the broken Nets right now. I mean, they're injured, but they seem to be getting it done and continue to play well against Giannis and the Bucks. So I'm going to be interested to see who ends up winning this game tonight.
All right. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who's going to win it? It's only a point the difference at the moment.
I think Milwaukee gets this one. I think KD has played, Kevin Durant's played unbelievably great, but I just, my gut's telling me right now, Milwaukee is probably going to get this one.
And what about Philadelphia or Atlanta?
Atlanta's played tough. It's scrappy. It's tough to root against them or cheer against them, but I just think Philadelphia and Milwaukee are probably the 2 best teams that should be in that Eastern Conference final.
Okay, thanks for that, Dan. Much appreciated with the NBA update. Paul, NRL round 15, bit of a letdown after State of Origin, but there's been some big scores.
Well, I remember saying it wasn't that long ago that when the Rabbitohs can win at Suncorp Stadium, which is the best ground in the country, I think, for rugby league against the Broncos, then I'll know we've turned into a good team. Well, we won 46-0, if you don't mind, on Friday night. So that was just beyond Thursday night. Sorry, that was just one out of the box. Unbelievable. We're just flat track bullies, I guess you'd call us. But the Broncos, though, Kevin Walters has just lost that dressing room. He needs some extreme effort. He needs Anthony Robbins, I think, to come in there and pep him up because he's just looking a deflated man. The irony, they've got the 2 best players, Lodge and Tavita Pengai Jr. on the open market because he's got the broom out. And Wayne Bennett, of course, at the Broncos for 20-odd years, couldn't resist having a dig at the press conference. He said, "Where is everyone?" And they said, "Yeah, they're off getting some Broncos news because Kevin Walters apparently is waving the axe around." So Wayne Bennett, he often says so much when he says so little. He was a bit smug there, having a crack at his former club who unceremoniously knifed him, looking at the debacle that the Broncos have become.
And Panthers Roosters, I watched part of that game. I watched the part where the Roosters were leading 12-0 after 13 minutes. The Panthers looked pretty shaky, but then a Nathan Cleary ball through following a try, and that was the end of it for the Roosters.
Well, one of the articles about it called it Symphony Number 7. You don't often hear classical music and NRL in the same headline all breath, but he's playing that well at the moment, Nathan Cleary. He pretty much was summed up best by his father, the coach, Ivan Cleary, that we just leave him to it. And I'm pretty sure that's what happens in State of Origin too. Be someone like a Dustin Martin, you don't really have to tell him much. He just gets out there and gets it done. So I'm sticking with my prediction, the Panthers to win it all. They've had 2 losses and they've bounced back. One team who's flying a bit under the radar, the Sharks, have won 4 in a row, if you can believe it. It wasn't that long ago that they were a basket case. I don't know if I put the Stan red pen through them a few weeks back, but they're in the 8, believe it or not. So first time since 2018, they've won 4 in a row. They had a very good win against the Cowboys. Valentine Holmes will probably go straight into the Queensland #1 jersey. There's another close game as well. The Knights, who I've always said are headed to bigger things, they're looking impressive now, the Knights. Kalen Ponga, their best player, is out and will probably be out of Origin. But when he's back, they signed Clifford at number 6 from the Cowboys, who's impressive. Mitchell Pearce is back at 7 and Jaden Brayley at 9. That's quite a good spine there. We always talk about the spine. I think the Knights, if you want to follow a team from here into the finals, I think that they would be very good value if Gelding wants to get on top of that. The Knights here on in, I think, will win a lot of matches and quite a few as outsiders. They beat the unpredictable Warriors in a close one. The Dragons surprisingly won. That would have sunk 1,000 multis around the country, I'd say. They beat the Raiders, who are in a bit of trouble. They've lost 8 out of 10, the Raiders, so they're in free fall. The Dragons had lost 4 or 5 coming into that. Ben Hunt was on fire. He'll play for Queensland, and it's good to see the Dragons get back on the winning side of the ledger.
Paul, the Raiders led 14-6 at half-time. The Dragons lost to the Bulldogs last weekend. How could the Raiders possibly let the Dragons back into the game? I just don't understand that.
No, well, a mate asked me for a tip for his punting club, and I said the Raiders specials. And no, it's just there's something very wrong there because the Dragons are dispirited at the moment. They've got a couple of players told to look around. I don't know if that happens as much in the AFL, but in the NRL, they justify it that we'll tell you at least you've got half the season to find yourself a new home rather than being dumped at the end of the year. But it doesn't help team morale and dressing room when you've got players like Dufty at the back being told you'll need a new place to play next year. The Storm absolutely dismantled the Tigers. It was quite appropriate. Michael Maguire's halftime speech was pretty much nothing. He did a Mal Meninga. He just pretty much looked at the boys and said, "I'm done." I walked out. And it's ironic they're playing the Storm because early in his coaching career, Craig Bellamy used to get so fired up he couldn't speak. He wanted to speak, but he just couldn't. He'd so Kevin Walters would have to take over and do the Bellamy speech. So Michael Maguire was that disgusted at halftime, walked out. The Storm put on 66 points. Now, that could have been 100 if they had kept going. 10 different try scorers, Professor. So just unbelievable the way they played. And that's with Pappenhausen missing. And he ties into our concussion theme. No one's sure what's happening there. He even had to take to social media himself, Pappenhausen, and say to people, "I know you're all worried. Thanks for your well wishes, but it's not a standard type injury. I don't know when I'll be back." So that is a concern for the Storm. But they've got Nico Hines, of course, playing the lights out. So there always seems to be someone popping up with the Storm. It's like that whack-a-mole game I take the kids to play. You know, you whack one down and then someone else pops up who's just as threatening. So there's no problems there at the Storm. They and the Panthers and the Rabbitohs, it's three teams above the rest at the moment. And that leads into this afternoon, Professor, probably the fourth best team in the comp, the Eels, playing against your Dogs. The Eels were very impressive last week, but as were your Dogs, Professor. 28-6 against the Dragons. I didn't see that coming. I meant to say earlier, it ties in with that extreme effort comment we were talking about. There was a very good point made during the week, is that some of your teams, your Broncos, the Dragons are at their worst, West Tigers when they're playing bad. No one can accuse your Dogs, Professor, this year of not having a red-hot go, even though the talent might not be there. They're trying hard, and you can see it. And it was good to see last week that win against the Dragons. $8 is value today. I don't think I can't say you'll win at $8, but I think the Dogs with the start. But the bet of the day, I think, is the Titans, and Schooner won't like this. I think the Titans at nearly $3. This will catch Gelding's ear. Nearly $3. Remember the Titans, Gelding. It's not a movie today. It's a Dalligan NRL outsider tip.
A Denver Washington tip.
They're averaging 32.5 points at home, the Titans. So that might be enough to get over the Eagles. Tommy Turbo's back, who might have just paid for a new couch in my house, perhaps. But his brother's out, Jake Trebojevic, and he's the engine room of the Manly team. I think the Titans will win in a high-scoring match up there at the Gold Coast today.
Manly have been in pretty good form, Giraffe.
Yep, that's it. But you can't land a knockout without throwing a big punch. So I'm going to have a go at this one. And I think the Titans at home are going to do enough. AJ Brimston's back. He's pretty electric, and they're going to be good to watch. David Fafita and some big muscles back as well for the Titans. So they've been not bad, the Titans, the last few weeks. They lost a close one to the Storm and a one-pointer against the Roosters, who are two pretty good teams. So just warn Schooner, Professor, to not go out and buy any cases of beer yet.
Paul, I'm glad to hear that you tipped the Raiders as specials, because I'm sure the Gelding was scratching his head when he saw the result about how I could possibly have picked that for one leg of the multi yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, it's tough. I think the Raiders are bad, but I didn't think that they were worse than the Dragons. So I'm surprised about that from the Dragons. They found something from somewhere, and I guess maybe we'll call it extreme effort, if that's this week's theme.
Paul, we spoke last week about the what press conferences are good for. Just a follow-up, we did find this week what press conferences are good for. Cristiano Ronaldo proved what they're good for. You can make the sponsor lose $5 billion in 10 seconds by just taking the Coke bottles off the rostrum, putting them down, and putting the mineral water instead. That is.
I like the look that he gave the bottles. The look that he gave those bottles would have turned shit white. I tell you what, just
it's like
just absolutely disgusting.
Yeah,
It's like Fred Nile looking at a bag of heroin or something. He just looked at the bottle and I thought it was going to move itself, the bottles. He glared at it like with such intensity. But
do you think
anyway,
do you think Coca-Cola will be his personal sponsor next week and there'll be bottles either side of him?
It came up pretty quick on social media that he used to be sponsored by them, but obviously they've fallen out.
Yes.
Maybe the check's in the mail or in the bottle in that case.
Paul, no NRL at all next weekend. Is that correct? Only the State of Origin.
Yeah, State of Origin's on the Sunday night, which is unusual scheduling, but all eyes will be focused on Brisbane. Queensland, $3.15. They've blown out since I said they were a chance to win, but New South Wales just impressive all over the park. When you talk about Jake Trbojevic out, there's so many people lining up to replace him. So there's just depth galore for New South Wales. Queensland are going to have to play out of their skins, which they will. But I still can't see them winning it. I just think that New South Wales team, but it wouldn't shock me if Queensland wins. I've been saying that for 12 years now.
Is there any particular reason why there's no, or reason why? Is there any particular reason there's no NRL matches next weekend? Because that just completely goes away from the formula that the NRL have had.
I don't know why that is. I'm surprised because I looked to see what Wednesday night it is, and then I saw it was Sunday, and I'm surprised about that. I certainly wouldn't be doing that. I'm not one of the players who's putting their bodies on the line every week, but I'm sure the clubs are loving the week off that don't have the Origin players. But I'm surprised about that because the game is really picking up momentum. We're heading towards the finals. It's taking sort of the foot off the accelerator a touch. If I was running the game, Peter V'landys perhaps, and I disagree. A rare moment, but I wouldn't be doing that. I'd keep it midweek. I think it works perfectly well. You've got a captive market. The audience was off the Richter scale for the ratings for State of Origin 1. So I'm surprised they've put it on a Sunday night and missing out on all those other games that haven't suffered too much through the Origin period.
Okay, thanks for that wrap up, Paul. Judge, I'm going to come back to you. You were mentioned in dispatches during the week in The Age. Good to see. Arising out of the decision by the AFL Tribunal in the David McKay case and the discussion that's created with how professional sports are going to protect the head in sport. What are your thoughts on that decision?
Yeah, interesting. I was surprised by the decision. I sort of couldn't figure that breaking somebody's jaw could be an allowable part of the game of Australian rules football, but clearly it is. So very disappointed. Look, the media attention, the AFL attention, it's a furor, but it's like a Chinese meal. These things. It's great for about 10 minutes, but after about 10 minutes, you need another one. So they just wait till the next furor until something else crops up, some other injury that the tribunal will deal with. So the view that I've got is that this whole issue should be taken out of the AFL's hands. And in fact, I think the AFL should delegate the issue to a bunch of sports scientists, footballers, both a male and female footballer, and a sports lawyer, and work out a solution to what is, I think, a massive problem, Professor, and that is the whole issue of concussion and CTE. I'd go so far as to say it's the biggest issue in collision sports. They're not contact sports. As somebody pointed out, ballroom dancing is the contact sport. They're collision sports. So let's call it what it is. Athletes becoming athletes. There's no flab on them. They're all muscle. They're all fast. They're well nourished. They're well trained. They are lethal in the games that we play. And this is just going to become a greater problem. I've said before, Dan, I do not know how NFL can continue. All they seem to be doing is making huge payments every so often to concussed players. And I've also said this before, but once they can analyse CTE before a person dies, I think they'll get a real idea of how prevalent concussion injuries lead to CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. and it's going to be a major hit on the game. Both for instance, from parents pulling their kids out, lawsuits against the leagues. So I think the league, the AFL, and in fact, I also think the NRL, Paul, should have a serious look at this without affecting the culture of the game. We don't want to do that. And you cannot remove the possibility that there may be injuries, but we've got to do better than this because it's killing people.
Well, the irony, and I've always said this with the NFL, is they introduced helmets for safety, but I'm not talking about a deliberate helmet-to-helmet contact. Just an unavoidable helmet-to-helmet impact is like a mini car crash. So if you're a running back, Dan could fill us in, but the exact number of times just a standard running back making a standard run of the ball would contact helmet-to-helmet. And I'm not talking intentionally, I'm talking just part of the game. If that's happening 50 times a game, times over your career, it'd almost be unavoidable that all those mini car crashes would not accumulate to serious damage. That's different to just I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it's different to isolated big hits where you're knocked out. It's almost mini concussion, which they always say about boxing, and that's Muhammad Ali suffered from. That you're floating, your brain's floating while you still appear to be conscious. So NFL has got to be in danger of all those mini helmet-to-helmet impacts that occur hundreds of times in a game. That could be the downfall of the sport.
Yeah, Paul, I mean, you've hit it. And it's not just the running backs. Obviously, the running backs, but really you've seen offensive and defensive linemen that have gotten a lot of the CTA cases. I mean, what the Webster from the Pittsburgh Steelers was one that was a center for the Steelers that was a focus of the movie that was out years ago relative to this. But the offensive and defensive linemen are button heads every play. And like you said, it's a mini car crash. You're talking about 300, 400-pound guys, giving everything they've got and hitting as hard as they can. But Judge, you bring it up. I mean, obviously it is a situation. It's a collision sport. And it's not just football, it's hockey. It's sometimes baseball, obviously the AFL and other sports like that. But I tell you, it is one that's just the lawsuits, and it's not just NFL players, but it's college football. I think there's over 60 lawsuits waiting in the queue just on concussion issues because of the sport of football. The question is, what can you do relative to it other than eliminate contact? Because the way the sport is built, and it's amazing to me that helmet manufacturers aren't the ones that are being sued more than the leagues are being sued. I mean, my mom told me back in the 80s I couldn't play high school football because she knew concussions were part of the game. I mean, helmets were designed to, or I hate to say designed to, but it gave you the false sense that you were protected from concussions, that just bumping your head and having this helmet on wouldn't give you a concussion. Well, obviously we've learned a lot since then, and you guys may know well too. I mean, the sports report shows, I mean, Sports Center, those type of things, even DVDs and VHS tapes were sold on football's greatest hits, and they were all focused on helmet-to-helmet contact or guys launching themselves head first into somebody to tackle guys. I mean, Dave Dewars and some of those guys, Ronnie Lott, that's how they were known in football for those hits, and they were glamorized in that respect. But it's a contact sport, it's a collision sport, and unless you take away the collision part of it and you go to a flag football situation where you're pulling the flags off the guy's waist versus trying to tackle him, I don't know how you prevent it.
Dan, Judge, just hang on just for a sec. Dan, I sent you the clip of the collision we're talking about. Have you had a chance to look at it?
Over and over. And this is the difficult part, guys. And I've been involved in a conference office, for 25, 30 years now, is when you're looking at those type of things, you're looking at intent in many ways. Was it intent to harm, or was it accidental contact? And I think the tribunal, Judge, correct me if I'm wrong, they ruled accidental contact. They didn't take it any farther in that respect. But there's a lot of times, and college football has done a lot relative to using your head to tackle the crown of the head. A lot of different rules relative to spearing and those type of things to try to prevent that type of hit. It still happens, and sometimes it is just accidental. But yeah, I definitely, Mark, I looked at that play over and over.
What did you think?
Well, the NRL has taken steps. They've banned the shoulder charge. The biggest hit I think I've ever seen was Sonny Bill Williams on Marcus Bai, who was built like the proverbial something house, and it was at a World Club Challenge at Wembley. They thought that he killed him. And when the trainer said, "Where are you, Marcus?" he thought he was back in Papua New Guinea. That's how hard he hit him. And that was a legal hit at the time, but people were laughing about it. And now these days it'd be very different because the shoulder charge is illegal. And it wouldn't be joked about that Marcus thought he was back in Papua New Guinea. And they used to say he's in Disneyland, et cetera, et cetera. That wouldn't happen as much anymore hopefully, because they've changed the stance. It isn't funny. It's good to see physical hits and it's good to see big impacts and someone pulling off a great tackle, but you certainly don't want someone rocked to the core like that.
Judge, you made some comments about the player who was injured. Would you like to share that with the viewers?
Well, Hunter Clark was the St Kilda player, Dan. He's got a broken jaw.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he'll be out for, pretty much the season. But I fear that in future, and this is just an existential feeling that we all have, when you have your jaw broken, the next time you're in a contest, you are just naturally going to think, I'm not going to go into that hard again. The body actually stops you, your mind stops you from going into such danger. It's fight or flight mode. And I suspect that Hunter Clark won't be the same player again when he comes back. He had a serious jaw break, in fact, in a number of places. So there has to be some recognition of that. And can I say, Paul, I mentioned this I got talking about this, but also heard about Boyd Cordner, who was a league player who's retired at 29. And he sounds like the archetypal bull player, very strong, courageous, and all the rest of it. But he said that a lot of his injuries were self-inflicted because of the way he plays. He'd hit somebody's knee, or it was incidental, but nevertheless, he's out of the game now.
Cooper Cronk put it best. He put his head where Cooper wouldn't put his feet. So that's the way he played the game. He just was in everything and as hard as you can play. So unfortunately, it was his undoing, but it was also what drove him to play for New South Wales, Australia, and winning premierships, just that style. Yeah. I mean, the one I'm waiting to hear from who has troubles, and I don't want to wish ill on anyone, but Martin Lang used to get hit so hard, it looked like he had whiplash after every tackle. He'd run in so hard his head would fly back, and it was a joke at the time. But I'm hopeful that Martin will be okay. But just his style, you certainly, and that was his kamikaze style, and that's no doubt how he earned his living and made his career. But it was, you'd worry for him when he was playing, let alone afterwards.
Gelding?
John, a question maybe to you, Professor, and John, both with your experience with football clubs and tribunals and football leagues and things like that. Do you think it's now becoming, John, that we could report someone on result rather than action? Well, I don't know what you think it should be.
Yeah, well, at the moment it's done on results. So if you, for instance, throw an absolute wild haymaker at somebody's head and they duck, there's no penalty. You just play on. Nothing to see here. So it's all done on the results, and I think it ought to be. That's one of the changes I'm looking at, is on the intent, and rather than he hit him, but it was illegal, but it was only he wasn't injured, so play on. Whereas the Hunter Clark, which I feel some way sorry for the Adelaide player. I don't think he did that much wrong, but it went straight to the tribunal because it resulted in a broken jaw. And I think that's looking at it from entirely the wrong point of view, which is why, as I say, I'd like the AFL to take it outside of the tribunal prison and have it from a sports science point of view.
Having talked with other people outside this type of forum and that during the week, we look at it, okay, you have the action, and whether that's the intent to hurt, as Dan was talking about before, that should be the reportable offence. The sentence should then take into consideration the outcome. As you said, like if you intend to hurt someone and you deliberately ran through them or deliberately did it, but because of your incompetence, you didn't achieve your intended result. The intent was still there, so there should be a punishment for that. However, if you do complete the thing, and as you said, a busted jaw, which affects someone, shouldn't that be covered under the sentencing rather than the action?
Personally, not. I think. I think the results are always random. You just don't know what results, and it all depends on the particular player, maybe susceptibility to injury, all the rest of it. At law, you take your plaintiff as you find them, and whatever the intent was and the action was, that's what they focus on rather than so much the result. I don't know if you have a different view, Professor, but that's the way I see it.
No, that pretty much well sums it up, John. Just getting off Gelding's point for a second, and you and I had a discussion about this morning, John. The tribunal members were all males who played AFL football. The chairman was not a player, but somebody who was legally qualified. My question is to you, John. Why, given that there's the AFLW now, why isn't there a female on the AFL tribunal?
Absolutely should be, Professor. No reason why there shouldn't be. You know, what's the expression? If you can't see it, you can't be it. Well, we just assume it's going to be an all-male panel. I'd be very surprised if it was an all-female panel if they all agreed that somebody having a busted jaw would be well within the rules of the game. And I think, not that women are softer, but they just take a different approach to the game. And I'd love to see at least one female tribunal member.
You've sort of answered my follow-up question, but it is this. If there had have been a woman or women on the panel who was deciding the case that we're talking about, do you think there would have been a different result?
Not if the woman was Carolyn Wilson, but anybody else, I think anybody else would. You don't know, because you can't generalise and say all women think alike, but you'd like to think there was at least a different viewpoint, because it is the habit of blokes to want to, collectively all come to the same view. Well, as we know with women, all those of us who are married, you don't necessarily get a woman in heated agreement with
Actually,
men. And we might just get a different result. But God, it's just so women have been in football, not just AFLW, women have been in football for a long time. You go back 50 years and half the crowd's women, they understand the game. And it's absolutely ridiculous that women aren't on the tribunal.
Can I ask just a question? And you guys will probably know, what happens like if there was an opinion 2-1? Do they say that, or they say the tribunal jury has found, unanimously that it's, he should be off, or it's a 2-1 vote, or
having been on many tribunals, Gelding, you don't want to do that. It just you take it as a collective, and the chair just gives the collective view, because if you make it 2-1, well, then who was the one? And then the media start getting involved. No, you have to have a collective view.
Okay.
And just following up on Judge, that's my experience as well, sitting on tribunals and appeals boards, Judge and Gelding, that the sentence, the verdict and sentence is announced. There's no announcement as to whether it was 2-1, 3-0, whatever.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Judge. Gelding, racing at 2 centres today, Bendigo and Ballarat. First question for you before we get to what your red hot tips are. Why would they be running 2 meetings so close to each other?
Very good question, Professor. It's quite common for 2 meetings on a Sunday, but normally there's one in the west and one in the eastern things, or, in the middle up, a Chuka, or there may be a Chuka and Horsham, or the other week, Eden Hope and Tarolgan. Ballarat and Bendigo, very close, and one on the grass and one on the synthetic. So, very, very different this today, Professor.
Are any jockeys going between the two? If any jockeys are going between the 2 venues, I'd be very interested to maybe have a look at it.
Yeah, so you normally get some jockeys riding in the country and riding in the city on a Saturday. They might be in the city in the first and then head up the country for a couple of rides later. But haven't seen any crossovers today, though, Paul.
All right.
Even though Jamie Carr's riding in the first 4 races only in Bendigo.
Well, yeah, bookended by 2 Mick Price horses. So I would imagine, I think I said before, Gelding, that she was obviously engaged by Price to ride his 2, and she's filled in with another 2.
Yes, and the next one's coming up shortly at 125 in Francie's School. So would have a very, very good chance, I would have thought.
So what are your red hot tips for today, Gelding?
Well, Professor, we'll go to Bendigo first. As we were talking about earlier with the giraffe, Damien Oliver's also gone to Bendigo on a Sunday. So that's quite a rare thing. So we've gone race 8, number 6, Alumna, Gay Waterhouse, Adrian Bott, Oliver to ride. Second up, that's always a bit of a worry, second up, but I think this one might be able to get across the line around about the $3.50, Professor. Then we go to race 9 at Bendigo. Horse number 14, Livingston Falls, for Andrew Noblet and John Allen. Hopefully we'll get out to round about the $2 mark, Professor. Currently at about $1.90, but hopefully we'll drift a little bit. And then we'll go to the synthetic at Ballarat a bit later in the day, the last 2 races. We will go, as I said earlier, when we're playing Form Guide Trivia, one for the judge in his profession, race 6, number 5, Our Guardian Angel, ridden by Old King, the Derby winner. I think that will have a good chance around about the $3, Professor. And then race 7, number 7, Kissing Game, in the last.
Well, since I've seen that, anyway. Yep.
All right. And another one I said to you earlier, Judge, at Ballarat today, race 5, horse 3.
Yep.
Prosecutor, trained by Shay Eden. Certainly an aim and bet for you.
Yeah, the hard earns on. Professor, can I just ask Gelding? I know as much about horse racing as I know about penguins, as I've said before, but I saw a show on Foxtel the other day, Sectional Stars. And
yes,
that's really got me in. And what it is it's actually using analytics for horse racing. And
it's been around with the racing maps, John, for a long time.
Well, no surprise that I've missed it, but because I've been a long time saying that analytics is the way to go, and this was like Moneyball for horse racing, and I was fascinated by how much attention they apply to detail, not just data, but analytics. And I'm not sure if you get your tips off that show, but I was fascinated with the whole thing. It was very professional.
This could be at the start of your downfall, Judge. This could be a gambler's help ad one day.
Absolutely.
It all started when I saw the sectional show.
John, it's kind of interesting. You'll see, this horse ran the last 200 in 11.5 seconds. Ran the first 600 in such a pace, and it follows all that. A lot of that comes to do with the races and the pattern of racing and things like that. You may have a slow early pace, or you may have one that goes out very fast and sets a fast pace, and the horses swoop over the back of it. Whereas if they race very slowly in the early part, the times, if a horse is giving 10 lengths and they've gone slowly up front, it's very hard. They've got the energy to finish off. So that all comes into it. You might find something that they'll say, flash tone, ran the last 400.
Yeah,
the amount of times people fall into that because the horse is sitting at the back doing nothing in the early part of the race and then flashes home for a great 5th or 4th, they think, that may do. But that may be the pattern of the horse. So
Paul,
I was going to say, if it's a Craig Williams special where it's seen more behinds than a Mardi Gras float, and it comes home, finally gets it out and flashes home. Of course it did, because he hasn't spent a penny. Yeah, because he's been stuck at the back.
Paul, you've got me thinking that in 10 years' time, I'm going to be getting up at a meeting saying, hello, my name's John. I'm addicted to horse racing. It's all because of Sectional Stars, which I started watching.
It's like when someone plays the
great.
pokies for the first time and they get the free spins with their first dollar or something. Then they end up spending 8 hours a day on the thing.
It
Well,
normally
Judge,
shows, if a horse can run a fast kind of time, it's good to know that they've got that in the background. The same as some footballers over the first 20 yards, they say it's very quick the first 20 yards. If they've got that kind of zing in them, it certainly doesn't help rather than a grinding type of horse. But a lot depends on the races and the way they're run and the tracks. And it's just another kind of thing to add on to kind of justify.
And more
trying to
more
pick the
behind
lotto
for the Mardi
winners,
Gras.
right?
That's going to be my saying for the week, Paul. Thanks for that.
There you go. Or more checks than a bank teller. I love Gelding. You reminded me when you're talking about speed. One of my favourite W type expressions is when they say he's got good foot speed. That's generally how you get somewhere with the feet. I don't know. Can you have good hand speed? They don't just talk about someone's got good speed, good foot speed. It's a strange expression.
They said Greg Williams, when he played for Carlton, he was very slow on the feet, but his hands were very fast.
Oh, there you go. Well, anyway.
Or you're able to read the player. Player may be slow, but they're a good ball winner because they know how to read the play and they're quick with their hands.
Well, someone, a Collingwood fan, phoned in and said Scott Pendlebury moves like a snail, which was pretty harsh going. But I think because he looks like he's got time to do things, I think is what Paul
he's
was
one of those sportsmen that seems to be able to do things. And they say it's slow motion when he's got the ball, but he knows to do exactly, and 8 times out of 10, he'll make the right decision in the right place.
My favourite batsman, Mark Waugh, be in the Windies and they'd be coming in at 150, but he seemed to have more time than anyone just to face the delivery and deal with it. Yeah.
Well, hey, Judge, one thing I'll note, Judge, on your comment, I do know that horses are faster than penguins, so I'll just leave it with that.
Well, that's something there.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks very much for your participation today. Dan, your selection with the Bucks, I'm just looking, there's 6 seconds to play according to my internet connection, and the Bucks are 2 points in front.
And now it's 110-109 with 1 second to go. Brooklyn is winning. So we shall see. See if my streak continues. Pick the other team that I didn't pick. So
all right, thanks, gentlemen, and we'll see you all again next week. Good afternoon.
Thank you.